in this era where we're seeing Nintendo and other video game companies try and be a little bit shady when it comes to character genders, when we see them trying to cuck to like SJW mindsets and non-binary they thems isms and just like being ridiculous, right? It's becoming more and more apparent to me that people aren't really going to respect it, right? To me, it seems as if people are simply just going to default to what the character actually is, as opposed to like pronouns that are slapped onto him or her, right? I think the go-to example for me honestly is Juniper from Xenoblade Chronicles 3. A character that allegedly was non-binary, allegedly was meant to be androgynous and not to be male or female, had this big shill campaign for her, right? But for anybody who actually plays the game, anybody who knows who the character is, who's interacted with her, who's done the quest lines and stuff like that, it couldn't be more obvious that the character is female, right? Same with Act with Splatoon 3. With Act, it's even more obvious because all you had to do to realize the the they them shit was forced is simply just go to Japan, read the interviews there, and you suddenly start like realizing that like wait a minute, like there's no question on Ox gender there, right? And again, like the problem with like non-binaryism, I've said this before about the they thems, like only women seem to do that, like at least in the West. It's becoming kind of a stereotype. So again, like seeing an obviously female character with like they them pronouns slapped onto her, like you are going to automatically call her she, her, a woman, you know, just like you would otherwise, because that's the issue with pronouns, right? Like you're not supposed to be told pronouns. You're supposed to just pick up on them intuitively and use them appropriately, right? Like again, this is why uh, the localization teams trying to shove this kind of thing into video games are just struggling so badly to get this to take off because they tried very hard to push the idea that certain characters are gay or non-binary or whatever, and the reality is nobody in the actual audience is falling for it at all, right? The whole Bridget thing, Guilty Gear is a really good example of this. Anybody who's like seriously pushing the idea that Bridget is trans, including the original creators, are delusional, right? Like that is clearly established to not be the case. And anybody who knows anything about Bridget or uh, knows anything about his lore in general knows he is biologically a man and proud of it, right? The idea that like Bridget is a tranny is just flies in the face of everything that we know about the character and the history of Guilty Gear, going back to the character's very inception, right? The entire gimmick of the character is that he's supposed to be a boy, right? So again, like retconning something doesn't work, changing something in localization doesn't work, relocalizing doesn't work because people are just going to localize it back. Like it's crazy playing Final Fantasy VI, like seeing all the changes they've made over the years, right? Like who's to say like in another 20 years we won't see like more redubs and more like changes and more adjustments to certain things, right? Like I don't feel like any concern about the future of entertainment at all. Because to me, it couldn't be more obvious that woke culture is on the decline and that people are like becoming more and more antagonistic towards it, and the people who have been like um, brainwashed into believing it are just spiraling down into irrelevancy, right? Like you just have to look at the major figures of Gamergate. Zoe Quinn, she killed someone. Anita Sarkeesian is having like wedding themed birthday parties. Like the Game Journos, Adam Sessler just had like a freak out like rage quit on Twitter, like calling anti-Israeli protesters like secret Trump supporters or something, right? Like again, like these aren't people who have a good handle, a good control over the situation. right? To me, it's like it couldn't be more obvious that that the culture is beginning to correct itself, right? The very forced nature of wokeism is being like destroyed rather naturally, being taken apart rather naturally at like the social and academic level, right? Like other than like the sheer amount of authority figures trying to push it onto people, it really has no like staying power at all, right? And just seeing like real world applications to this, seeing how like everybody just kind of avoids they thems, like if you see a danger here, you just kind of like peace out immediately, right? You don't go around, you don't talk to certain kinds of people, you don't associate people with people who believe certain things. Like to me, it's just it couldn't be more obvious that at a certain point that the entire thing is going to collapse. And like having a video game character with the incorrect pronouns is not going to convince anybody that like being non-binary is perfectly normal or like even a real thing at all, right? Like it just isn't gonna work, right? You're talking about a video game character, a thing that doesn't technically exist, right? So it's becoming more and more obvious to me that I think people will just ignore the pronouns, ignore the propaganda, ignore like the nonsense, and it'll just kind of like slowly be dismantled over time due to being how ridiculous it is, right? The Vivian thing, like from Thousand Year Door, Vivian was the one character I thought they might be able to get away with slapping they them pronouns onto because Vivian was a man in the Japanese version but became a woman in the English version. So I thought that they would seriously go down this route of like, oh, is he trans? Like, but the reality is, it doesn't matter what they do as long as they stick, as long as they stay away from like the they them pronouns, right? I'm happy with just not seeing they them pronouns. They could keep like the original English localization, or they could keep the Japanese one, like the Japanese version of the character, as long as they don't pretend the character is anything other than what he is, right? Like it's it's interesting in this regard. Like it's not going to impact anybody uh if they decide to do something like radical with the character is kind of my view on it. Like I don't even think I would have like not bought the game if that was the case, if they tried doing that. Right? Because I like the Thousand Year Door. I'm very interested in seeing what they've changed and what they've added to it and stuff like that. Like to me, I'm just very, very tired of seeing people like endlessly complain about this kind of stuff. And I just want to play high quality, interesting video games.